talk to y'all about vaccine management. It's a little off topic from everybody else's, but it's a very important part of this whole thing. Back when H1N1 was going on in 2009, I tried to keep a low profile. I've been working for public health for 17 years, and up to 2009, nobody knew who I was, and I was very thankful for that. After H1N1, it all blew up, and now everybody knows my name. It's kind of like being at Cheers. So, and Robbie, that was very, very nice introduction. I appreciate that. You know, I'm glad you didn't give everybody my direct phone number. They have to dial 2 or 3 numbers to get to me, so that's great. A little more background about me. I actually have a degree in criminology, and this is so far away from being in my wheelhouse. Public health was not what I wanted to be when I grew up. Of course, I didn't want to be a government employee when I grew up either. So, and yet here I am, 23 years later. So, we're going to talk about vaccine management, including storage and handling. It's basically the basis on which we keep vaccine viable. You don't want somebody just picking up the vaccine when they receive it and throwing it off on the side and not keeping it at the specified temperature, which is 36 to 46, by the way. A proper cold chain is a temperature-controlled supply chain that includes all equipment and procedures used, not only in the transport, but the storage and handling of vaccines from the time it's manufactured to the time it's administered. If we expose vaccines to temperatures outside the recommended ranges, you can decrease their potency and reduce the effectiveness. So you don't want to leave them out or expose them to high temperatures or low temperatures. Overview, we're going to talk about staff training, vaccine shipments, storage and handling, transport, and a few resources. All right, staff training. With the Vaccine for Children program, we have approximately 519 providers who administer vaccine to underprivileged children. Basically, the VFC program is a federal entitlement program. We provide vaccines to children on Medicaid, children who are uninsured, underinsured, or are American Indian or Alaskan natives. And those children are ages 0 to 18. Once they reach 19, they're no longer part of the VFC program. So all of our VFC providers receive training. We tell each clinic that they have to have a primary coordinator and a backup. And I don't know how many of y'all deal with private provider offices, but keeping somebody there as a primary and a backup is a nightmare. They're always massive turnover. So we're always getting calls to come back out and do more training because the girl that was here 2 weeks ago is no longer here. We got another person and the backup is left too. So we do a lot of education, and we teach them how to oversee the proper receipt and storage of handling of vaccines, how to organize them properly in a storage unit, because there is a good way and a bad way to put your vaccines in the refrigerator. There's a proper place in the refrigerator, believe it or not. We also tell them to record temperatures on a temperature log. As simple as a task that is, we have a lot of people who do not know how to do that. We also teach them how to rotate vaccine stock, put the closest expiration dates to the front, the longer expiration dates to the back. We tell them to monitor the expiration dates and respond to potential temperature excursions. If the temperature goes above or below the recommended temperatures, we tell them they have to call the vaccine manufacturers. They have to call us to say, hey, what do we do? We also ask them to maintain documentation, which could be the temperatures or the documentation of the equipment and maintenance records. And we also ask that all staff in the office are adequately trained on all these aspects. One of the trainings that they can do, CDC has several modules online. They're called You Call the Shots. They have modules where you can get CEUs for the Vaccine for Children program, vaccine storage and handling, and they have a module for each vaccine preventable disease that's covered with the VFC vaccine. So if you need CEUs, it's a good site to go to. All right, receiving and unpacking vaccines. We asked the primary coordinator or backup if they're not going to be there or they're going to be working in the clinic somewhere when vaccine comes in, that somebody notifies them when vaccine's received. We've had several instances where vaccine came in, the primary coordinator wasn't there, the backup coordinator was somewhere else, and they just stuck the vaccine off to the side without putting it in the refrigerator. Of course, that vaccine 2 days later, when they found it, was no good. So we tell them they have to notify the primary coordinator or the backup when it comes in, so we make sure that it gets in the refrigerator. They're also supposed to examine the shipping container and the contents. We don't want, you know, if a box of vaccine comes in and it's damaged, we don't want it sitting there. We want to know if I'm sweaty. Want to know if the vials are broken or the packaging's broken, so that way we can make sure the vaccine's good. If it's broken, when we receive it, we can call either McKesson or we can call the vaccine manufacturers and get it replaced within a 2-hour window. We also ask them to cross-check contents of the container against the packing slip. Each box has a packing slip. They're supposed to look at it and make sure, you know, if they ordered 50 doses of vaccine, the 50 doses came in. If there are discrepancies with the packing slip or questions about the contents, we ask that the person who opens the box, if it's not the primary vaccine coordinator, notifies the vaccine coordinator or their supervisor so they can call us at the state office, and then we can investigate, you know, what happened. If there are questions about the viability of the vaccine, if it got too hot, too cold, we tell everybody to label it, do not use, quarantine it, and put it in the refrigerator under the proper storage conditions, but separate from the other vaccines where it won't be used until we find out if it's viable. All right, when the vaccine comes in, we ask everybody to record the contents of the container on the inventory log, which is the name of the vaccine, the number of doses, the date it was received, the vaccine manufacturer, the lot number and expiration date, and they need to keep a logbook for all their storage equipment. You don't want to have a refrigerator that's been sitting there for 5 years that hadn't had proper maintenance. So we tell everybody to keep a logbook of their vaccine storage equipment, the serial number, you know, when it was installed, when they had routine maintenance, and the contact information of the service provider. We had a warehouse where when I first started working for public health, we shipped our own vaccine. So we had the vaccine shipping area out there. We had all these refrigerators, and we had to keep up with their service. You know, we still call Kimco, who is our service provider right now, because they were the low bidder. They come out and make sure that the refrigerators and the freezers are still working properly. Vaccine storage units. We tell all of our vaccine providers that they need to have standalone units. Most doctors' offices, if you go in, unless it's a large provider, most of them have household refrigerators. NIST did a study. CDC actually asked NIST, who is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, I had to write that down, to do a study on which refrigerators or which storage units provided the best refrigeration or freezing. And they came back and said either standalones are preferred or pharmaceutical grade units. Most smaller providers cannot afford a pharmaceutical grade refrigerator because you're talking $3 to 10 grand, depending on the refrigerator. So most providers use household refrigerators. Well, household refrigerators are great, but you can't use the freezer section of it because it will freeze your vaccine in the refrigerator section. In order to get the freezer section cold enough, it's too cold for the refrigerator. So we tell people if they're going to use a household refrigerator, they can only use the refrigerator section. And absolutely under no conditions do we allow anybody to use dormitory type refrigerators. All right, the NIST studies the standalone refrigerator. It can easily maintain appropriate temperatures. It didn't matter the storage density or the packing style. It didn't have a major impact on the vaccine temperature. In normal use of door opening and closing, the thermometers remain within range. You didn't have a real big drift in the control thermometer. Pharmaceutical grade refrigerators demonstrated they can maintain appropriate storage temperatures. The storage density packing style door opening didn't have a big effect. Out of range temperatures occurred when there was direct contact with unit walls or near the cooling vent, and temperatures remained stable during defrost cycles. That's one of the major issues with the household refrigerators is during the defrost cycle, it would throw it all out of whack. Your temperatures would be up and down. Combination refrigerator freezers. The refrigerator section was able to maintain appropriate storage temperatures. Sometimes you had moderate fluctuations. The freezer section couldn't maintain the frozen temperature because, again, in order to get it cold enough in the freezer, you'd freeze the vaccines in the refrigerator section. Even with freezer control set to coldest, vaccines stored inside the freezer experienced thermal excursions above minus 15 degrees Celsius. And the defrost cycle caused major thermal excursions in the freezer. The dormitory style refrigerators, we absolutely tell our providers they cannot use those because they do not maintain vaccine temperatures correctly. And you can't control the temperature control. They have an increased range of location-specific temperature variations. The ambient room temperature also causes issues with the temperatures. And there's not really a good storage location within the unit. We tell people to have a refrigerator that's big enough to hold an entire year's worth of vaccine. That way when they have the regular vaccine that comes in and the flu vaccine that comes in, we're not scrambling around trying to figure out how to store it all. Here are some pictures of some vaccine storage units. On the left is the freezerless and the dual zone where it says, you cannot use the top, the freezer section. The under the counter, they do make pharmaceutical grade under the counter units or full size units. In the county health departments, we have the pharmaceutical grade full size units. Most of them have the glass doors. We also ask everybody to put do not unplug stickers on the outlets and on the cords. And we also have little stickers that go on the breakers to tell. A lot of times we have cleanup crews that come into the office and they'll unplug the refrigerator in order to plug up the buffer or the vacuum or whatever. And they forget to plug it back in. Well, you've wasted who knows how much vaccine if you unplug it and leave it unplugged. All right, I brought an example of this. We have providers. We've given providers a calibrated digital data logger, which looks, the example I have here is the one we use in the county health departments. For digital data logger, it has a vial of glycol. You put this in the refrigerator, put this outside the refrigerator, and it tells you the temperature inside the refrigerator. It also has a digital readout to tell you what the temperature is, what the high and low has been. All you do is unplug the vial, plug this into your computer. You don't have to have software. It's pretty simple. It gives you an X when the temperature's gone out of range. It gives you a check if it's fine. Pretty dummy proof. All you have to look for is an X or a check. So you'd think it's dummy proof, but I've been proven wrong. Be amazed how many times we go, well, did you check it? Well, yeah. Did you notice that big X on it? Oh, no. I'm like, it's an X. It's not hard to check. It's good. X is bad. So we ask all providers to have one of these for the refrigerator and another for the freezer, and to have a backup as well, because they have to be calibrated every 2 years. So they should always have a backup in case something happens that goes out, the battery goes dead, whatever. Several types of temperature monitoring devices are available. They should have a digital display, a detachable probe, an audible alarm for out-of-range temperatures, low battery indicator, a memory that stores at least 4,000 readings, and user programmable logging interval. We tell everybody to program their interval for one reading every 30 minutes. Vaccine temperature guidelines. For refrigerated vaccines, they need to be between 36 degrees Fahrenheit to 46 degrees Fahrenheit, or 2 to 8 Celsius. That's going to be much of your flu, pretty much everything but varicella and MMRV, which is measles, mumps, rubella, and varicella, and the shingles vaccine also has to be frozen. The frozen vaccines have to be minus 58 to 5 degrees Fahrenheit, or minus 50 to minus 15 Celsius. All right, again, your storage unit should be big enough so vaccines and diluent can be placed in the best place to maintain constant required temperature away from the walls, coils, cooling vents, ceiling, door, floor, and back of the unit. Doesn't give you a lot of play there, does it? Basically, the two middle sections of the refrigerator, there should be plenty of space between the vaccine and diluent stacks or containers. We have to have air circulation. You can't have them all jammed in together where air can't circulate between the boxes. Vaccines should be stored in the center of the unit because this is where your appropriate temperatures are typically the most stable. You can't store vaccines in the doors or in the deli, vegetable, or fruit crisper drawers. You don't need to store vaccine on the top refrigerator shelf. And we ask that you use water bottles as a thermal ballast, basically a drinking water bottle. Like what's in front of Tamiki right there, a water bottle. Fill it up with water, stick it in the areas where you're not supposed to put vaccine, like the door, the crisper drawers, the bottom of the refrigerator, and the top of the refrigerator. That will keep you from putting the vaccine in the wrong place. Here are some examples of where to put it, where not to put it. The dual zone, which is to the left, you shouldn't have vials touching the glass shelf or directly under the cooling vent. You put your water bottles there. The yellow section is near the cooling vent. You don't need to put vaccine there where the air is going to blow on it. The green area is, again, the good place to put it. Put it in the original packaging inside if you have storage trays, put them in the storage trays, but leave them in the box they came in. And keep it at least 2 or 3 inches away from the walls and the ceilings. The red is absolutely no, and no storage in the crisper drawers. You can take the drawers out and fill the space up with water bottles to keep you from putting the vaccine in the wrong places. And the bottom stays about 1 to 2 degrees Celsius colder than the other places. Temperature variability. Household standalone refrigerators have possible front to back temperature variability. It's like 2.5 degrees Celsius when the doors frequently open, 1 degree Celsius when the doors kept closed. The vials in the front are typically warmer than those in the middle. The vials in the back obviously are colder than those in the middle. Providers can continue to use these units, but they should know about the front to back variability. You keep it in the center. Don't get it too far back toward the back of the refrigerator. Don't get it too close to the front where you're opening the door and the heat from the room is coming in. Temperature cycling obviously can cause temperature increases. They're greater in household combination units and standalones than in the pharmaceutical grade refrigerators. If a refrigerator is working properly, the defrost cycle can cause a measurable temperature increase, but it shouldn't routinely cause temperature excursions. Temperature storage units shouldn't cycle more than 2 to 3 times a day unless it's an old unit. And if it's cycling more than 2 to 3 times a day, you need to look into replacing it. Thermal ballast, which is the water bottles. It can mitigate your temperature variations. If you put water bottles in standalone refrigerators, it reduced the impact of the defrost cycle depending on the location of your probe. In study results, use of water bottle ballast eliminated excursions above 8 degrees Celsius caused by the frequent opening and closing of the storage unit door. Another thing, if power goes out and you have the ballast in there, you're not opening and closing the refrigerator door, it's going to maintain a viable temperature. You really don't have to worry about it typically for up to 12 to 24 hours. So NIST also studied the use of water bottles. They compared the temperature increases inside all of the storage units with and without the water bottles. Periodic door opening without the water bottles resulted in an increase of 0.2 degrees Celsius to 1.2 degrees Celsius higher than with the water bottles. If they left a refrigerator door open a crack for an hour with the water bottles, it resulted in a longer time frame before it got out of the correct temperature limit. Simulation of a power outage without water bottles or with water bottles, they can provide as much as 3+ hours before exceeding temperature limit, depending on where the vaccine is located and if you're opening and shutting the door. The best placement for water bottles, you fill the refrigerator floor, the top, and then on the door. You can also, instead of using just regular water bottles, you can also use milk jugs, fill them up with water, stick them in the refrigerator or the freezer. And they help stabilize the temperatures. This is a picture. These are several pictures of what not to do. I don't know if y'all can see these, but vaccines are crammed in. See, the little freezer section is completely a block of ice. They hadn't defrosted that thing in forever. B, they're just thrown in the refrigerators kind of willy-nilly. C is good except for the fact that the top shelf has got vaccine on it. D, vaccine's just crammed in there and it's in the door. I don't even have an explanation for E. If I were to walk into a provider's office and see that, I'd take my vaccine and go home. Just saying. And F, again, you know, they're in trays, that's great, but they're out of their original packaging. They're just dumped in the little trays. Yeah, I'd have a fit about that too. Emergency transport. This is probably going to interest y'all more than the rest of this. So we don't like, except for an emergency, we don't like for providers to move vaccine. In fact, I've told providers that my VFC vaccine, they cannot move it. Reason being that we had a couple of providers up in North Alabama, who shall remain nameless, that decided they needed to move vaccine from one office to another office 15, 20 minutes away. And instead of doing the logical thing of, let me put it in a bag, put it in a cooler, put some ice on top of it so it will stay viable. No. They threw it in a brown paper sack in the middle of July, carried it to their car, got in the car, and, oh, wait, I got to stop by Walmart, pick up a few things, stayed in Walmart 1 to 2 hours, did their little thing, and then took it to the office, and well, why isn't it good anymore? Well, let's see, it's July, it's 100 degrees outside, probably 120 in your car. You've just ruined tens of thousands of dollars. And vaccine's not cheap. It's not cheap at all. When you're figuring a dose of HPV vaccine costs roughly $180 a dose, you know, you can mess up quick. And then you have to call me and explain to me why you're a dummy. And then get, you know, upset when I get mad. Well, you know, $60 million is sounds like a lot of money, but it's really not when you're talking about 520 providers throughout the state. It doesn't take long. When I first started doing our spend plan, I'm thinking, holy cow, you know, $20 million, wow. Now I do it every year and go, oh, it's only $60 million. Yeah, no big deal. It's like monopoly money now. Your tax dollars at work. All right, emergency transport. If you don't pack it right, you can freeze the vaccine, basically. Properly packed emergency transport containers should keep the vaccine at temperatures within an appropriate range for 8 hours. If you frequently encounter emergency situations, power goes out, tornado, hurricane, we tell everybody to have a qualified pack out or a portable refrigerator, or have somewhere you can take the vaccine. All right, for the containers, we recommend that you use hard-sided coolers or the styrofoam coolers that the vaccine came in. Don't use soft-sided collapsible coolers. Those are awful. You can't even keep a 6-pack of Coke with ice for more than a few hours in one of the soft-sided collapsible coolers. And you should have containers that are large enough to move your entire vaccine supply, not just one small container to think you're going to move 100 vials somewhere. It's not going to happen. The recommended coolant, the vaccine comes to folks with the little gel ice packs. They do not recommend that you use those if you have an emergency and have to transport it. They recommend that you use conditioned frozen water bottles. Basically take one of the water bottles that you have in the freezer, run some water over the top of it till the ice starts spinning in it. When you do the water bottle like this and the ice turns around, that's a properly conditioned water bottle. They also make phase change material, but last I checked, that's pretty expensive. We can't afford to buy it, so I don't know many providers or many county health departments that are going to be able to afford to buy the phase changing material. Do not use the frozen gel coolant packs, including the ones that came with the vaccine shipments. They're a little difficult to tell when they're properly conditioned. You need to store a good quantity of coolants in the refrigerator. Load your freezer up with water bottles. So that way when you have to move it, use the water bottles. For temperature monitoring, when you transport, again, you need one of these. Digital data logger with a detachable probe, and you have to have one that has a current and valid certificate of calibration testing. With the correct order to put it in the cooler, you have the bottom of the cooler, you put the conditioned water bottles, line the bottom with the conditioned water bottles, then you put a piece of cardboard, and then you put bubble wrap. If you don't have bubble wrap, you can use brown paper. And then you put your vaccine, put the buffered probe in the vaccine, put more vaccine on top of it, and then relayer it with the bubble wrap or brown paper, cardboard, conditioned water bottles, put the top of the cooler, and this section has to be sitting on top of the cooler. You don't want to have to open the top of the cooler to look and see what the temperature is. Here's a few pictures. Top left is obviously the cooler. The top right is the conditioned water bottles. Tells you how to condition them, freeze them, run a little water over it till they start to spin. Bottom left is the bubble wrap. If you don't have bubble wrap, you can use brown paper. And bottom right is just a hard-sided cooler. And here's the proper way to do it with pictures. Conditioned frozen water bottles, insulating material, more insulating material, vaccines, temperature monitoring device, more vaccine, more insulating material, conditioned frozen water bottles, close the lid. This pack out can maintain the appropriate temperatures for up to 8 hours, but you don't need to open and close the top of it. All right, here's some resources. Most of this information came from the CDC Vaccine Storage and Handling Toolkit. There's also vaccine storage and handling guidelines, and a keys to storing and handling your vaccine supply training video. All this came from CDC, so it's a good resource. Basically, just go to CDC's website, type in vaccine storage and handling, and it gives you oodles of information.